It's really, truly amazing. By the way, we're not going to do a lot of resetting. One of the reasons why I wanted to come on to this format is I don't have to reset and re-explain what we're doing. So just a formatic detail here. If you miss something, go back and listen again and get it right. Because this is important information. Eric Stakelbeck is here. He's a GBTV contributor, and he has been following this group. We have talked about this really since last spring, and I know both of us have been following these kinds of people for quite some time. First thing, sweep up on the radicals, Islamists, communists, and socialists, an idea that has been panned for a very long time now. And this is not a new idea. All you have to know is history.
Glenn, there is quite a precedent for this. Back in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution was in full swing, the communists, the socialists, the liberals in Iran were full-throated backers of the Ayatollah Khomeini. They worked with the Islamists to help the Ayatollah come to power. Now, once he came to power, they were thrown out in the wastebasket. Literally, Glenn, a few months after the Ayatollah Khomeini seized power, he rounded up the communists, the socialists, the left, imprisoned them or executed them. So I think that is a cautionary tale for today's left. Very short-sighted to work with these guys. They don't know who they're getting in bed with when they jump in bed with jihadis.
I remember how many people called me crazy. How many people called me crazy when I said, you know what, you have to understand, you're fighting a union workers thing or a anti-America thing. They're fighting for God. In the end, you lose. If you're partnering with them, you lose.
Yeah. Key point here, Glenn, and you mentioned it. In every country, the Islamists are the most organized, and they have a clear goal. But I think the key thing is they are the most ruthless. They will grab power by the throat. They will use any means necessary. You look at Egypt, and God bless these young Facebookers, Twitterers, who were involved in the revolution in Tahrir Square. But at the end of the day, they will be swept aside by the ruthlessness of the Islamists.
Well, I'm sitting up against the wall as a guy who's in St. Louis, a guy whose back has the Star of David carved into him as he went to the hospital to have, to have that cleaned up. One other question before we move on to part two, which is revolution and what they're talking about revolution here in America. Tell me a little bit about how this group is in our country and all over the world. This is not just 100 people or 200 people or 5 people in Chicago.
Yeah, and now we're going to sound like conspiracy theorists here again, Glenn.
Don't care.
But look, it's all connected. It really is. Hizb ut-Tahrir America has links to radical jihadist groups in Great Britain. There's a guy by the name of Anjem Chowdhury. He's probably the most notorious Islamist in Great Britain. I've interviewed him. Very bad guy. He is kind of...
You feel evil on him?
You and I talked about this before, where you're in the room with a guy like that, Glenn, face to face, you feel the presence of evil. Yes, you do. I felt it a few times in my life. That was one of the times. But he is a guy who sets the ideological blueprint for Hizb ut-Tahrir America. This is all connected. There is actually a group as well, Glenn, here in New York City, in Queens, a few miles from where we're sitting, called the Islamic Thinkers Society.
Oh, bad dudes.
Very bad dudes, linked to Chowdhury, Hizb ut-Tahrir America. This is all connected. In these conferences in Australia, in Belgium, Chowdhury is the ideological purveyor of all of these conferences.
Okay. We're going to have some solutions for you tonight, America. We're going to have some things that I want you to do, some things that people I want you to connect with, groups that I want you to help if you can at all. This is serious business, and the people who are standing against it are alone. More on what they're calling for a revolution in America, in their own words, not mine, after the news update with Amy Holmes at theblaze.com. Amy?
Thanks, Glenn. Energy Secretary Stephen Chu is getting bitten by the Solyndra scandal. Welcome back. I'm Amy Holmes with news updates for you from theblaze.com. The congressional committee investigating the scandal wants to hear why the Nobel Prize-winning physicist gave the go-ahead for a $535 million loan to the now bankrupt company. Chu okayed the new loan terms back in February. The terms bounced private investors to the head of the line ahead of taxpayers should the solar company default. Chu ignored concerns raised by Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. As the Los Angeles Times reported this week, President Obama was warned by his top economic advisors about the risky energy loan program back in October. Meanwhile, today, House Republicans unveiled their plan to block additional taxpayer dollars for the Labor Department's Green Jobs Innovation Fund. The White House is requesting an additional $60 million to the billions already appropriated and spent. I'm Amy Holmes, back at the top of the hour from theblaze.com. Stay tuned.
It is a revolution for a Khalifa. That is the word Caliphate. This is a theory of mine that I told you back in January and was roundly dismissed, and it is now beginning to happen. And you are beginning to see how all of this is beginning to destabilize the world and how much trouble we're in. We'll give you some hope at the end and some things that you can do. But it's important that you spread this information. The next focus at this conference, From His Butt to Rear, in Chicago. This happened this summer in Chicago. The next focus was revolution. Watch.
We're even participating in the rewriting of history, not only of the Muslim Ummah, but the history of the world. And again, it's important for us to read the history so that we can interpret and we can analyze what's happening before our very eyes. This has been said before. History repeats itself. This ummah is like a body. If one part hurts, the entire part hurts. And this, brothers and sisters, is shaking the throne. It's like a dreaded, fearful occurrence to them that the Muslims simply want to unite and live under Islam.
That's it. They just want to simply unite and live under Islam. Okay. He says teach history, that history repeats itself. If you'll notice, right behind me is a clock. In fact, can we walk back over here? There's a clock right here. We show it to you almost every night. History repeats itself. And yes, it does. If you look at the monitors behind me, yes, it does. History repeats itself. He said he could have sounded like he was giving a speech written by me. Read history. We're in historic times. It's time to be a part of history, not just watch it. It's all too familiar. This is almost the same thing that I say to you tonight, but there is a big difference. Their path leads to revolution. It leads to hate and destruction. My path does not. For their success to happen, it requires something else to happen, and that is the collapse of capitalism, period. It doesn't work any other way. They know this, and they openly strive to be what he calls the final superpower of the world. Watch.
Do we want Khilafah? Yes! Do we want Khilafah? Yes! Let this revolution continue until it's complete. Let this revolution give birth to the final superpower. Do not let the sacred blood of our martyrs go in vain. Khilafah, unity, and liberation are within reach.
Notice the words they're using and how many of these words are being used by the left now. Unity and liberation. This is the battle, America. Whether anyone in the mainstream media cares to admit it, whether anyone in the halls of power in the United States care to admit it, if it is politically incorrect, so be it. It is good versus evil, period. Freedom versus oppression, period. Killers versus liberators. We're in a battle, and yet we are not fighting. We're too worried about typecasting too many Muslims as terrorists on TV. We're searching our grandparents at the airport because we don't want Muslims to feel singled out. Well, you know what? America is a fair nation. We do have fair play in our heart. We don't want anyone singled out. But what we've lost here is common sense. For years, I asked, where are all the good Muslims? Where are they? Well, they are here. We featured them on 9/11, on our 9/11 broadcast. They are begging for America to wake up, but the mainstream media ignores them. They are begging. Many of them or their parents moved here to get away from the oppressive regimes in the Middle East. They know far better than any American scholar or any talk show host about what these people mean and mean to do. What is life like under Sharia law? Watch.
How would our lives be under the Caliphate? Islam will be made supreme in the land. Islam will be the ruling system in the land. Under the Caliphate, we will be unified. One state, no 57 states, but one state. Our political unity would mean that there would be no borders. We wouldn't need passports. The military would be in the hands of the Muslims. We wouldn't be labeled as terrorists, fundamentalists, as ragheads and crazy people, because we would have a state that carries our ideology.
They have a state that carries that ideology. It's called Iran. The fact that they wouldn't be called terrorist anymore because they'd have a state supporting their ideology. Not exactly reassuring. They are, by definition, terrorist states. Islamic rule does not peacefully coexist with other religions or institutions. It replaces or kills them. Eventually, it replaces or kills all of them because they believe, quote, the Quran is a message for all mankind and the solution to all of men's problems. It's not a problem that one Muslim might believe that or a million Muslims might believe that. The problem comes in enforcing that. At the end of this conference, they handed out the key points of their Constitution. You want to know what it would be like? Are they really, truly peaceful? Is this something that we can coexist with? Article 7 describes that the state will be charged with implementing divine law. Therefore, quoting, all those guilty of apostasy from Islam are to be executed, end quote. Remember, this is the Iranian pastor who is facing possible execution just because he's converted to Christianity in an Islamic state. Article 56 declares that military training is mandatory for readiness for jihad. But I thought all of the world problems would go away. Why would there be a need for jihad? Here's why. Because they will kill you if you disagree with them. There's a story on The Blaze today of women that were lashed for defying a driving ban in Saudi Arabia. Sound familiar? Rampant sexism is guaranteed. Under their constitution, strict gender segregation. Women are not allowed to hold positions in government. Article 157 also states Israel is excluded from foreign trade. Does that sound familiar? Does that lead to the things like the Muslim man who spoke out in favor of Israel, in favor of just recognizing the Holocaust, and had the Star of David carved into his back in St. Louis, Missouri? At the 2009 conference, the leaders confirmed that the Constitution of the United States would in fact be replaced. Their Constitution would replace the American Constitution. In their own words.
Get rid of the Constitution for Sharia, yes or no?
Over the Muslim world? Yes, it would be gone.
And so if the United States was a Muslim world, the Constitution would be gone.
If the United States was in the Muslim world, the Muslims who are here would be calling and happy to see the Sharia applied. Yes, we would.
The Constitution gone, that's all.
Yes, as Muslims, they would be long gone.